Hey, welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Today we have a fun conversation about virtual assistants and the keys to bringing them onto your practice successfully. We welcome Cory Pinegar of Teem and Dr. Joe DeLoach. So Cory is with Teem, T-E-E-M, and don't confuse that with your practice team or T-E-A-M. So Cory founded Teem to help us be successful with virtual assistants. We have a great conversation, talk about some things that I had not considered when we brought on our virtual assistant. I hope you enjoy the discussion. Please join our discussion, leave a comment, share a note, share the conversation with a friend. Of course, give us 5-star reviews and support those who support us. Discovering the impact of LifeMeter this year has been truly transformative for motivating my patients with macular degeneration to embrace carotenoid supplements. With this non-invasive device, we can now quantitatively show that supplements are working. LifeMeter assesses carotenoid concentration in the skin, reflecting fruit and vegetable intake, and indicating levels in other vital tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, LifeMeter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness have been validated in 2,000 subjects of varying background. What's more, it offers the flexibility to prescribe the best-suited products for each patient. My patients love knowing their numbers and witnessing improvements in as little as a month. Better yet, compliance with carotenoid supplements has surged, doubling our sales of MacuHealth since the LifeMeter's implementation. I am honored to be sitting here with Cory and Joe, and we're going to talk about something that I think is really kind of popped up in the last couple of months, and that is virtual assistants. I know some listening to this were really cutting edge, and you probably, virtual assistants is old hat. They're integrated already into your teams and part of your systems. But I think for a lot, this is a very interesting and exciting new frontier in healthcare, running a business, and really how we take care of our practice and our patients. But before we jump into the discussion, which I know is going to be fantastic, I want to have Cory and Joe both introduce themselves to everyone a little bit. So Joe, we'll start with you, and then we'll jump into Cory because we haven't heard his story yet. So welcome back, Joe, and just remind everybody who you are and why we get to talk to you a bunch.
Yeah, so Joe DeLoach, Practice Compliance Solutions, stranger to few. We, as a compliance company, we actually got involved with this. It's been well over a year now, and it actually was Bethany Fishmine that got me involved with this concept of looking, because her company, Power Practice, was really big into, and I don't want to steal Cory's thunder here, but I actually don't like the term virtual employee.
Hey, you can steal my thunder.
Because they're real. And what I was pretty anti this whole concept for a long time, until I realized that a remote worker's a remote worker, whether they're remote at home in the same town as your practice or remote in Brazil. It's really no different. They're not in your office, but they're real. They're not virtual. So I tend to commonly call them remote workers, just like the rest of them. But Bethany got me involved from a standpoint of looking at it, obviously, from a compliance side. What are the potential, compliance issues, especially with HIPAA, and what are the potential HR issues with this whole concept? And so we started investigating a lot of the companies out there. And I guess later on we'll figure out how I ended up, getting involved with Cory. But it's a pretty easy explanation. They were the only company we really found that checked off all of our compliance boxes. So we actually have been involved with this for about a year and a half now. And I'm just here to answer those questions related to those concepts, because Cory's the one with the company and the one that can really be of benefit to you here. So I'll turn it to you, Cory.
Services and overdue patient recare services for dental practices. And we built our services up to thousands of dental practices across the United States, had hundreds of team members in Utah, and then magically COVID hit. Wages, as we're all aware, went through the roof. Finding people was nails on a chalkboard. And getting people to stay within a business even once you hired them was a problem within itself. And we had 300 people plus within our call center. And so if we were not every single month bringing in 20 new heads, we were shrinking in size due to our current churn. So we were brainstorming as an executive team a couple years ago, and the idea of hiring a few remote team members who were a part of the BYU Pathways program in Brazil and Argentina came up. And I will be the first to admit, I thought it was the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I had called Visa and MasterCard a bunch and had a horrible experience where they couldn't answer my questions, and I'd get frustrated and I couldn't even understand what they were saying. So I was very anti ever having staff with that, outside the bounds of the United States. But we were in a position where we really had no other alternatives. So we hired 2 as a pilot. I thought it would fail. I can confidently say that I was horribly wrong. We found some of the most dedicated, hardworking individuals that I've ever come across in my life. Those 2 individuals that we hired nearly 3 years ago now are still with us today and have grown immensely within our business. And so what I realized during that time is there's amazing people throughout the globe. And really what COVID did is it flattened the earth. Before, the idea was you had to go to a physical location to make work happen. And that's still necessary in a lot of functions today. But there's things that happen in the back office of an optometric practice that necessarily don't need to be there. Insurance verifications, revenue cycle management, new patient phone calls, admin-related duties, confirmation calls that don't need to bog down the front desk and the relationships. And so that's really why we're here today. There's amazing people around the globe who are looking for careers with practices and come at a fraction of the cost, which allow practices to operate less stressed and more profitable.
Yep. Oh, awesome, Cory. And that's really what drove my office to look at virtual assistants. We've had one as a scribe. We're hiring another one now. Actually, I think we engaged that person today and are going to start training. But I want to make sure that the team I have at the office is there 100% dedicated to the people that walk in the front door. And I want the patients who are not there to get their full attentions met or needs met as well without having to wait. And so instead of having one person try to be the in-person person and remote person answering phones, replying to emails, engaging, it made more sense for us to separate the 2. And from a financial perspective, it actually allowed me to invest more in the team members that I had, so that the ones that wanted to have a profession within our practice could turn it into a profession. Because sometimes we just honestly couldn't pay enough to do that. It was a really good job and they wanted to stay, but because their life needs, and look, I'm in San Diego, which was just rated the single most expensive place in the country to live. Go us. Right? But they need to be paid accordingly. And so this allowed me to invest into those that really wanted to be there. And then also get the needs met, and help somebody in wherever part of the world they're at, who, to your point, want a career as well.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. So, and I'm sure there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, but what are, in an optometry practice, what are some of the ways you're seeing practices engage with their virtual assistants and use them to help make the practice more efficient or skill set wise?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's evolving. Most practices come to us currently for 4 core areas of service. Number 1 is inbound phone calls. When the reason we even chose to dip our toe into the space is we looked at data from Weave and other major phone providers solely dedicated in the optometric space. 28% of all phone calls that are rolling through to practices during business hours are currently going unanswered. And so we said there's obviously room to drive better patient care and better financial for performance for the practices. So number one reason we get called is right there. Number two is overdue patient recare calls, confirmation calls, some of the busy work that often falls on the back burner. When you're checking patients in and out, you need a second to breathe. You've been on the phone with, a insurance company for the last 45 minutes trying to get information. So that's 1 and 2. Number 3 is insurance verifications. And especially as we ramp up into the new year, insurance verifications will be a very hot topic. And then number 4 is scribing. And we have people hire for, other more minute areas, but those are the greatest 4 areas of impact. If you ever went to hire a virtual assistant, we've been lucky during the last 2 years to do well over 700 of these roles. And we've watched people be incredibly successful, and I've also watched some nuclear bombs go off. And so if I gave people my 2 cents on what should virtual assistants be used for, it's once you've done something in your practice where you know how it works, you know metrics that they could be held to, you know how to train them, then take that exact same process, you know how to bake cookies, and then just hire someone else at a more cost-effective rate to do it. Where it doesn't work is, hey, here's a brand new concept that I'm not really sure, and now I'm about to communicate with someone remotely. It doesn't lead to as smooth of a transition. And so those replicable, consistent processes that are vital but can bog down the busyness of a practice are what should be moved over to a virtual team member.
So this isn't fairy godmother that's going to come fix all the problems that I have internally.
Hey, I wish it was. Yeah. I'm still waiting for that day to happen.
Yeah. Well, when you find that, I'm sure it'll cost a little bit more. But no, I agree with you. In fact, we listed out exactly what the job description was, so we knew what we were hiring for. And what occurred to me as I'm writing down the 4 things that you talked about, the answering the phone calls, the recalls, insurance verifications, for the most part, those are the things that my good in-person people don't like to do. Right? That's the crap sandwich they get to eat at work when you don't. So you try to do everything but do those things, which is why they fall away, because they're not fun for that personality type, where the right person loves that. The person that loves that, I've also found, doesn't like as much that in-person interaction and relationship. So they excel in different roles.
You bring up something really important. Why do these team members that we're hiring in behalf of the practices get excited about these roles and opportunities? It is so common, just as I started off today with, for Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Accenture to have 100,000 employees in a certain country that all work in a massive building in some type of call center functionality where they are just a number. The opportunity to get to go work for a small to medium-sized human-based business is radically different, where they are valued in real in-person interactions, not just reading a script and then getting told to fulfill their duties and to hit their numbers. And that's what outsourcing, when people think of it, was for so long. And what we're trying to break the stigma on is they're humans just like the 3 of us are today. And so if they can be engaged and be in a role that's different than what they've spent their last 20 years doing, this is so exciting for them. And then the pay to go along with it puts them in the top 20% of their own country, where they are moving them and their families forward to where they can live better lives.
Yep. No, it's fun for us to get to know them as well. I know that when we engage our virtual assistant as much as we can in the office, we get to know them, we get to know their family, we celebrate their birthdays. They're there virtually with us celebrating birthdays, and so it still has that small office feel, and it was something I was concerned about, and it's been really kind of cool to see that my fears not only didn't come true, but they engage so much more with us on a personal level.
That is, if you look at the reason that we have, when we look at employees who feel engaged and happy within a business, that's the number one reason, where they feel valued and treated as the same.
Yep, absolutely. Now you said something, and this is where my expertise really, really falls off the ledge, and I'm glad we've got Joe here. So you made the comment, and I wrote down, we're hiring on behalf of offices. So what I don't know is once I engage with a virtual assistant, so I engage with Meet, and I say, hey, I'm looking for a virtual assistant. What is that process? And Joe, I'm going to ask you to jump in on, number one, should I be concerned with what that process is? And two, what are the things that I should be aware of? Because hiring virtual assistants is new to us, right? And I want to make sure that I'm protecting my entity, I'm protecting that individual, I'm protecting everything, and just doing it in a compliant way. So when you say you're hiring on behalf of offices, what does that look like, Cory?
Really good question. So we get paid as a vendor. And so if our fee is, $1,800 a month or $1,600 a month, we get paid. The vast majority of that is dispersed to the team member that we have. What we do is we serve as something called an EOR, or an employer of record, where we bear that risk. Our agreement with the practices that we serve is with the practices. So we serve as the intermediary of misclassification and compliance risk, but then also cybersecurity and HIPAA compliance there as well. Our job is to bring expertise on how to set up international labor laws and also cybersecurity in a way that practices are protected. We get lucky to do 50 plus new roles of this every single month. And so we have the ability to get really good at how do we set this up to be successful. So not only part of our relationship or value here is bringing a really great human being who's engaged, but setting it up in a way to be long-term secure and successful. And really what we have to own is that employment law or misclassification law, and then helping guidance on the HIPAA compliance and cybersecurity portions. Joe's the expert here, so I'll really turn that over to him.
Well, this was exactly why we were drug into this, and I literally mean drug into this, because interesting, much like Cory, when all this came up, I was like, this has to be the craziest idea I've ever heard in my life, because I think everyone associates it with, calling Dell Help Center or MasterCard, like Cory was saying, and having an entirely frustrating, if not completely unsuccessful experience. And I was just like, I want to bring that into a healthcare practice. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. Plus, is it even legal? And so that's where we came in and had to start, tearing this stuff apart. And, the compliance side of it from like HIPAA, which is the main compliance, regulatory law in the association, that's pretty easy. It's just a matter of them being trained just like you train your own staff. And in this case, we have a company that's assisting in that training as well. So that's all great. My biggest concern actually came from the HR side. And Cory kept using two terms over and over. It's misclassification, employee of record. And that it really is the key to why we latched on to Teem. Because you have two choices in this remote hiring process. You can be the employer, or you can use a company that is the employer of record. So where do you want the HR responsibility to lie? And understand that you are under the HR laws of that person and where they live. So you may hire them for your practice in Texas, but you're actually under the laws of where they live. So do you even know what those laws are? I mean, it's hard enough to follow laws in the United States and understand them. You have no concept of what the laws are there. That's why you need a company that is the employee of record. They are the one responsible for adherence to HR laws, compliance laws, all these things that we have to do in the United States, they should be responsible for. And we've only found one company that actually does it that way. Now, there may be others. I can't say that I can speak for the entire industry. But Cory's company is the only one we have found that really checks that box off completely of, I think of it like a staff service. I mean, I'm almost like renting staff from them, but they work for them. They're the ones that are responsible for their HR. They're the responsible ones, kind of responsible if something goes wrong, not me. So that was the biggest thing. Now, having said that, I also want to throw in my personal story because we hired Teem remote workers as well. A company that we were totally against the whole idea all along, and now we've got them. But my situation, Cory was talking about, what do you use these people for? And he mentioned it's kind of, I don't want to call them the mundane things, but it's not the real complicated things in your practice. I went at it totally opposite. I said, my number one problem in running a compliance company is keeping up with all the changes in compliance law. So I sit around an hour or two every day being a pseudo attorney, reviewing listservs and articles and on and on and on. And it is the bane of my existence. And I said, if we're going to do this, that's what my team person is going to do. They're going to become my pseudo attorney. So I jumped into this thing like into a 20-foot pool. And we spent 2.5 months training this person before they have ever done one function of their job. And it's the greatest investment I've ever made because Maylee, my team, basically my personal assistant, is now doing the job that I hated to do, but was one of the most essential components of practice compliance solutions, which is keeping current of what the law says. She's doing an amazing job. And I just can't also say over and over, I actually watched a podcast, and I wish I could remember the OD's name. He's up in New York, well-known guy, but I can't remember his name. And he was saying, somebody asked him, do you ever get grief for hiring these people outside the United States? And he's like, well, he used some explicatives that I'll leave off, but it was like, no. I have had running advertisements in the newspaper with the AOA, with everybody trying to hire people. It's just nonstop. I'm paying every month to recruit these people. Nobody wants to come to work. Nobody wants to stay. Nobody's enthusiastic. Nobody wants to be here, much less at anything I am capable of paying them. And he has, I don't even know how many. I think he said he had like 8 or 10 remote workers among his 2 or 3 offices now. Wow. And it's like, I don't feel bad about it at all. These people are ecstatic, and they have a work ethic that I've never seen before. And I would agree with that.
Well, it says a lot when a compliance company jumps onto something, and I would agree that. So my attitude, because I got asked that, in fact, by my own team when they said, "Hey, why are you looking outside?" I said, my personal take is I want to give opportunities to those who want the opportunities, and not just I want it on paper. I want to give opportunities to whomever wants to work hard, build a career, build a profession, and we live in a global economy. And so as much as I would, like to be isolationist, we're not. And I think it's important in understanding a global economy. Patients have really responded well to our Scribe virtual assistant, and the little kids enjoy the cat that pops up in her background and kind of changes around. But there's a personality there, there's an engagement there, and unfortunately, I live in California. Well, not unfortunately, I love California. I don't shovel snow, but the game changes, and our minimum wages are going up. Minimum wages for healthcare employees are going up, and while I may be able to, on paper, excuse myself from things from those requirements, my team are healthcare employees, and I think they deserve to be paid as healthcare employees, and so I need to be able to work within the game to take care of everybody, including the practice itself as a whole. So I want to go back on one term both of you talked about, so the employment of record, because before this discussion, I've never heard that term, right? I was always the employer of record, I guess, because I hired people. So what we're saying here is when I bring on my new virtual assistant, I'm not actually hiring them, right? So we may have to come up with a different term. You've hired them, and I'm just engaging with them.
Yeah.
Walk me through that terminology a little bit there, Cory.
Yeah, employer of record is a newer term as the world is more of a global economy than it's ever been. Are you familiar with a PEO, or a professional employment organization? We are a global PEO.
Okay.
Because some people are like, well, I don't even, my practice is in California, which has, or let's make Washington as an example, tougher employment laws. There's more paperwork than typical, and stepping outside the lines is something people don't want to do. We do that in Latin America and other parts of the globe. As an example, like Brazil is broken into 10 plus states within it. Our paperwork and the information we collect and verify is different in every state to factor in employment and contract law information that is important. So it's our job to stay up to date. Every year, our general counsel has to review information to determine that we are in or not within misclassification. We bear that risk. That's part of the job going forward, because as a solo practice, it would be so expensive to do that for one off employee to fully stay within compliance for the benefit of the team member you hire and also the practice. We're able to aggregate that cost over hundreds of practices and hundreds of team members and really be an expert at great people at a reduced cost and helping them work and be classified correctly.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
let
want
me
to deal
just
with any of that.
let me just add that the dramatic nature of what he just explained is truly going over the heads of many of our colleagues right now. What he just explained was the way it happens. And you have to understand, remote workers are nothing new to the United States workforce. It's just new to optometry. This has been going on for decades. It's really not that new. But doing it right is becoming very, very important. And I'll come back to that topic in just a minute. But your alternative to what was just explained is here's some people that you may want to hire, and if you hire them, you're the one that needs to know what all those 10 state laws in
The beauty
Brazil's.
of this, I can record it or mark where it was, and we can go back and see.
I know that's the crazy thing, and
I
he's
think we
over
lost
there
Cory.
going on a passionate rant,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's gonna be in the podcast, and then you can naturally pick
He
it
was getting
back up.
fuzzy.
I love Joe. The
Well, hopefully he helps back in here in a minute.
yeah.
Do you release it as a video, or do you just do the audio?
We release as a video, but I mean, 5 people will watch the video.
Yeah, most
Everybody
people
else
just
listens
listen.
to the audio.
Yeah.
So it's we've talked about doing a going video, and what's interesting is, so my son, who's 20, is our producer. We just brought him on as a producer, and he kind of scolded us and said, "You guys are, a bunch of old dudes. Like, you should be throwing this on YouTube channels. You should be throwing this on your Instagram." And Chris Wolf goes, "Crap, I don't even have an Instagram on my phone." So it's a totally different world and way of engaging, but
I watch the
doubt
vast
about it.
majority of my podcasts on YouTube.
you watch them?
Oh yeah. Well, I just will. So I have a couple screens here, and I just, when I'm doing like more mundane paperwork, I'll throw one up in the left corner, and then I just keep on working away. So I totally agree with his sentiment. I actually enjoy watching like verbal expressions and how people react to certain things. And it's just 2 people sitting on a couch or 2 people on a split screen going back and forth.
Yeah, no, it's super cool way to engage with people. What in earth? So I think I didn't move enough in the room, so I'm gonna go move and turn the lights back on.
Hey.
All right, well, I'll mark again. So we'll continue on a different topic and then come back with Joe. The new topic. So one of the kind of the fun things with we found out when we were hiring a virtual assistant is we didn't know what we wanted. We know that the task we wanted done, and even though you're engaging with somebody, and I've since found out the process is really no different than if I hire any other employee, right? I've got candidates, I talk to them, we all put on our best face, we pick which one is going to be the best, and hope it works out well. We've got to put them through a training, curriculum so they understand us, even if they came from optometric or healthcare background. They got to learn the EHR or the practice management system. And so we've since learned that, engaging with a virtual assistant is no different than engaging somebody in the office, other than you don't have that time where you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting to meet with them, or they ask awkward questions. Came from an insurance background, so understood the nuances of insurance, is incredibly detail oriented, which is probably who we're going to hire first, because that's the role we're looking for. But now I'm being told I have to create a new position. So kind of walk us through what's that engagement with and what have you found the importance of having that manager? How many offices are they engaging with? What's their role in this whole process?
Yeah, and really good question. So, part of what we do, or part of what I believe, going to the business side, which I think is interesting, Peter Thiel, who is the founder of PayPal, part of his, mentorship that he goes through is you want to find an industry and you want to monopolize it. And when we looked at data before we jumped into an industry, I found optometry to be interesting. And what we don't want to come in and do is just provide great humans, but how do we also connect with the practices and serve as advocates and mentors? So all of our customer success managers come from practice administrative roles within optometry. What that allows us to do is actually connect with the people within your practice and others' practices when they say, oh, I really need help here. It's not, oh, explain that to me. It's, I've lived and breathed the hiring struggles and training multiple people. And then also, when we hire a brand new team member and they start after their first week, and the success manager is checking in with them and saying, hey, how are things going? And they say, hey, it's going really well, but I don't understand this part about scribing or scheduling a new patient. They can again connect with them and move things forward. And so not only do we want to be providers of great humans, but we want to again serve as the advocates for remote work in a way that actually works successfully, as an advocate and a mentor and an advisor for each side. Other things that we're doing specific to optometry right now is we have a direct integration with Weave. And so practices, instead of having a third-party line or just having their team members not being able to answer the phone, is actually making those inbound and outbound calls, which makes more of a unified one-team approach. Other things we're doing right now is actually looking at pieces of technology that work best for remote scribing. And so using a dictation service that our scribe is looking at, so they're picking out the pieces of information. We've been testing certain mics that the doctors could wear or have within the room that give us the greatest level of clarity on that dictation too, so that I'm not like as a scribe leaning in saying like, okay, what did I hear? What are they saying? Where should I put in those notes? And so how do we get really specific? Because it's someone's first time hiring a remote scribe. They're like, okay, do I set them up with a remote connection? What tools do I give them? Can we have a one pager that says, hey, you're hiring your first remote scribe. Here's what you need to order. Here's how you should integrate them. We've watched people do it really well. We've watched people not. This is what leads to success. And the team member having the tools to succeed where they can do it really efficiently. And so we see ourselves as holistic advisors for success within the practice.
That's awesome. And you just dropped a lot of stuff there. And one of the things that you said, I think you skimmed over it a little bit. And I did do a little bit of research on this during COVID when we all went to telehealth. And that is, how do we engage with people in a doctor, relationship in a HIPAA compliant way. And we were able to use FaceTime or whatnot for a brief period, that certainly isn't what we wanted to do. And so finding the HIPAA compliant secure connections was important. One of the things I was impressed with you all was that your virtual assistant came with that subscription, I don't know what else to call it, that was compliant. So the responsibility wasn't on me to try to figure out which of these different video engagement systems I wanted to use. You came with a very viable option, so that I didn't have to worry. And also integration of Weave, which made us happy. And I don't know the penetration in the market with optometry with Weave, but my understanding is it's pretty darn high. But that allowed them to seamlessly kind of integrate within our practice without me trying to have to figure out how to get it done and whatnot, which I think are two very important things. And I think Joe's back with us. But, from just how I engage in protecting patient health information and secure connections, what is the importance of making sure that I've got all that squared away?
I mean, number one, it's just providing a really good, easy integration for the practice so that it's not clunky. And how do we do it in the most secure way so that patient data is kept as secure as possible and standards are met at the highest level? And so for us, it's how do we advise practices? This is a lot of, practices first time hiring virtually. And so instead of having them clunk through that process where there could be compliance or just frustrations, we want to serve as an advisor to make the process as seamless as possible and reduce that pain of doing so.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment there because I think sometimes, again, we're kind of deviating from the thought process here. This remote worker is no different than if they're in Brazil as if they're across the street. They are not in your office, and therefore you must have a secure HIPAA compliant connection to them, whether they're down the street or across the world. It's really no different. But what Cory is stating is they are another resource to help you make that happen. Now, I'll rain Aaron on your parade just a little bit because as the covered entity in HIPAA, the ultimate responsibility for securing that still is your job. So what Teem is providing is just additional expertise to help you make those decisions. But ultimately, you can't go back to Teem and go, gee, your stuff didn't work right. You have to, ultimately make sure that's correct. But you're dealing with somebody who has more expertise at this than probably you do. So it's just another added benefit of the process.
Yeah, very cool. And out of curiosity, Cory, what are you seeing practices use for video conferencing and telephone engagement?
So for video conferencing, our two recommended platforms are Google. Now, something important to note is a Gmail account is not HIPAA compliant. A Google business account with a signed BAA is HIPAA compliant. So as part of our agreement with the practice, we bring a Google Enterprise licensed account that they can join and set up all of the meetings with. We can also do Zoom. And then we also set up Slack channels that, again, are HIPAA compliant, or you can use other forms of in-office tools. But the important thing to note is it's not HIPAA compliant out of the box. Usually you have to go search for the BAA within the agreement in Google, in Zoom, in Slack, and engage that.
Yep. And that's probably good advice for anything that we do from if we're emailing, just currently our emailing system, to making sure that whether it's Gmail or whatever, that it's a HIPAA compliant system.
Well, and the reason I said that is I notice all the time I get emails from drx@gmail.com, and the more secure we can make things allows just for a better protected environment going forward.
Yeah. So cool. And Joe, I know that you helped us do that years ago, and so we're very familiar in our office now with the Google business and making sure that it's compliant, and I'm less worried now when patients are responding or employees are responding to patient emails and things. So,
Yeah, and I also think,
I don't have the fact.
yeah, it's really changed. I mean, if we go back 3, 4, 5 years, establishing compliant connections and all this, it was fairly costly. It's just not anymore. I mean, totally HIPAA compliant email systems, domain based, are cheap. Things like Google Pro and Google Business, they're just not expensive. So it's not a barrier like it used to be. These things are establishing really HIPAA compliant programs. It's just not that complicated anymore. And a lot of the companies know they have to be, or they're not going to get the business. So the majority of platforms are becoming HIPAA compliant. But it's pretty easy. I mean, I just look at the contract with them. It's got to state they're HIPAA compliant. You do have to have. Cory keeps saying business associate agreement, and I think he's trying to make a point there that it doesn't matter if you have this stuff if you don't have the business associate agreement in place, because that's the bond between you and that company that says, hey, we all are on the same page here, and it's an essential component of HIPAA compliance.
Perfect. And PCS compliant or customers are very well aware of that.
Yep.
And if you're not, really, I think it's compliance. Enjoy you may laugh, but it feels like it's the same story, just with a couple of different players when you're talking, whether it's HR or HIPAA or OSHA or fraud and abuse, right? Just make sure that you know the rules, that you've got it documented appropriately, and then you're following whatever your policies are.
Yeah. One other point I wanted to make that both of y'all were talking about this can simplify the process. And Aaron, you were talking about how difficult it is to find people and go through the employment process and the regulations in California, and they can come in with bone spicules through their nose, and you still have to hire them. Remember, you're hiring somebody in a different country. The rules are different, and how you can not discriminate, but more mandate that these are the requirements for the job that we have, where some of that mandate in the United States can turn into discrimination real fast, where you're dealing with another agency. You can, tend to avoid some of those potholes that you can fall in the discrimination category. Not that you're trying to avoid the law or discriminate against anybody, but,
Right.
like you said, unfortunately, you're in California, and, you can't, if you don't look at them with two eyes and both eyes wide open, you're probably discriminating against them. So it's really nice to have somebody else that is the HR arm, and all you're doing is paying them to do that for you. And that's really the system that we have here.
Oh, absolutely. I love all my employees, but I hate the HR part of it. And so having somebody else be able to do that is huge, especially not knowing the rules of the game wherever they're from. We've talked a lot about the compliance training in our office. I'm a big advocate of PCS, and so we do our annual compliance training as a team. When we hire somebody new, we make sure that they get their compliance training. Cory, how do you have your virtual assistants get trained? Do they go through a program? Is it my responsibility to make sure that they keep updated on their training?
Yeah, really good question. So in regards to HIPAA compliance, what we're actually finalizing with PCS right now is a corporate license within our learning management software where all new hires would go through a HIPAA compliance process, just like in your practice, where we would be licensing that for all of our new hires through PCS. PCS by far is the leading compliance leader in the optometry industry. And so as part of our promise to be industry experts, we wanted to bring them in and license it for all of our new hires going forward. We're still finalizing that. So that is not started as of today, but over the coming months, we're looking to launch that for all new practices and new hires going forward.
Awesome. Well, I didn't know that to even tee it up, but that was a perfect little tip.
Hey, and I was sitting there saying,
like a setup,
he
didn't it?
teed it up, and I slowly backed up and I took the biggest home run because I said, hey, I ain't going to mess this one up.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm kind of speechless now, but I mean, having systems, and Cory, you mentioned this earlier, having systems are important, and you know, maybe more so than others, I'm really worried about just, failing any sort of audits. I want to make sure that I've dotted my I's, crossed my T's, I've got a system in place so that I can focus on what I want to focus on and not worry that a boogeyman from a 3-letter agency is going to come in the office and close us down for something silly. And I want to be able to show that. So it's PCS has been fantastic for us, and clearly you agree.
And this is not from my knowledge of optometry, the cost of not being within compliance is not worth it. Sometimes I think people say, oh, it's too costly from a HIPAA or a tax or an employment law perspective. I've owned and operated my own business or businesses for over 7 years now, employed thousands of people within the U.S. As you said, either the stress that comes from miscompliance or a 3-letter agency chasing you, or the cost. It is just too cost effective today, and it is worth every penny in the world to never face the boogeyman, and worth every investment out there for your own personal health and lifestyle, and then also the sake of your business going forward. And that is not just an endorsement of PCS, but it is the right way as a business person to operate your business, or else at some point you will get caught, and it is way too painful and expensive to get out of.
Yep, nope, couldn't agree more. And in fact, and we're getting away from the VA discussion, but I think this comment's important. I hire somebody every year to come in and audit our charts. In fact, I just had Chris Wolf in the system to come and audit our charts this year to say, hey, from a medical standpoint, are your charts appropriate? Or what you're doing? And what we found is that, they were good. There's some tweaks we can make to make it better. And we were very much optometrist and undercoding. And so we can do a better job there. We had Joe come in, I believe it was earlier this year, and do a whole walkthrough on site of the office. Opened every drawer, looked under desk to make sure that I was compliant on that aspect of it. And I think that the cost to fix where I wasn't was $200. But I'm sure it would have been a whole lot more, and they were little things that I wasn't even aware of. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that preventative care, preventative maintenance, whatever you want to call it, is a lot easier than dealing with the repercussions on the back end. I had a question that just left my mind. Cut that out. It was a really good question too, and I just forgot it. It was the worst. Shit, I can't remember.
Hey, that's the worst moment where you're like, it's on the tip of your tongue, and then bam.
Yeah, that's all right. We can cut this part out. And Joe, I don't know if we're going to get your, hopefully we get the audio when we lost you, if it was recorded to you, but I know you were making a really good point. Do you recall what you were saying?
Yeah, and I thought maybe we could go back and try to emphasize that because the point I was trying to
Yeah, let's
make,
do.
and this, this really goes beyond just remote workers. Yeah, I've said many times, and I don't mean it to demean our profession or anybody in particular, but we all graduated with OD degrees, and they didn't come with a JD behind it and a marketing analysis degree and an IT degree. We're optometrists, and even though we may understand pieces of that stuff, we're not experts. And the way the world of regulation is evolving, you need expert advice and you need to do things in an expert manner. And so back to remote workers, to me you have, as I've analyzed the market out there, you predominantly have two choices. You can look for a almost like a job search company. And so we've searched, and here's 5 people. Go interview them and hire one of them. That's fine if you're in San Diego, but again, if you're in Argentina or Nicaragua or wherever the heck you are, you're under those laws and you have no idea what you're doing, and it's just very, very risky. Your alternative is an employer of record, where that's what they do, and you're just contracting them for that service. And it's all of it's on them. I mean, I hate to say it's all on Cory, but it's all on Cory, and that's what you're paying for. And that is just absolutely one of the most significant key components of making the decision to have remote workers, is to make sure you're not putting yourself at risk. The last thing I was getting ready to say, and Aaron, we talked about this before, and it's the job of a compliance company to always look for the boogeyman. That's what we have to do. That's our job. And the boogeyman may be a year away or maybe 2 years away. But I'm firmly convinced that at some point the United States is going to wake up and go, wait a minute, we're hiring all these people from foreign countries and we're not getting the tax benefits of that. They're not getting into the system anymore. We don't like this. And what are we going to do about it? And that's when the radar is going to go, is this being done in a legal, compliant manner? And I truly believe that day is coming. And I would want to be on the side that is 100% legally doing it the right way when my government steps in and says, no, 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 this wasn't legal then and it's not legal now.
No, I 100% agree with you. I mean, it's been in recent history, last couple of years, really that California looked hard at independent contractors, and what the definition of an independent contractor was.
No, they didn't look hard at it. They eliminated it.
Well, I was trying to be nice. And that threw things for a loop. And so I think being aware of and being on the front end, and there was no, hey, I didn't know. Right? If you got caught up in that, you got caught up in that. And it wasn't pretty financially. So I couldn't agree with you more.
No.
So, and I'm fighting with this light again. So I had my question and then the lights went out. Today's been a day.
Hey, it's a Monday, but it's a Tuesday.
We call this Monday number 2. So really it's a question I remembered I wanted to ask you, Cory. And I think we've talked a lot about the positives of virtual assistants, how great they can be, some of the ways they're using. And you hit on it a little bit, but what I want to know is where should I not look for a virtual assistant? When does that it doesn't make sense? It's not the time, it's not the role. When do you see it not work for practices?
Yeah, really good question. Number one, it's not your first hire. You need someone in practice who is focused on building patient relationships, patient care. There's reasons to be cost effective and there's ways to save and engage more money. The first hire is not the one, in my opinion. Number two, and I'd say this is much more of a broad stroke, is the hire has to be integrated in. So if you're just looking to hire someone who's cheaper and put them out in the corner over there where they're doing some level of work for the practice, but you're not integrating them in, you are not maximizing the value, or you're not the right fit for our service. We deeply believe that people, to maximize value and success, need to be integrated into the practice just like anyone else. And so those are kind of the two steps where if you're not ready, if you're just saying, oh, I can toss my paperwork over there and it's going to be done, and I'm going to tell them the numbers they need to hit every day, and I don't want to talk to them beyond once a month just to make sure that they're good, it's not the right fit because the team member isn't engaged and valued where they're delivering the best work.
Yeah, I'd like to take that last comment and stretch it just a little bit further. And we learned this as a revenue cycle management company, and pretty much any revenue cycle management company you talk to will agree with what I'm getting ready to say. And it is the number one reason for failure of a remote billing company is staff sabotage. And I'm going to probably go out on a limb and say it's really just what Cory just said. They will sabotage this unless they buy in. So they have to buy into the remote process exactly the way you have. They can't be threatened to buy it. They can't think this is not a member of our team, or they will take it down. So that's just a little bit broader statement of what Cory said, but the staff has to buy this or it won't work.
And ultimately, doctors need to help purvey that this is the benefit, just as Aaron talked about. This is for the benefit of the internal team, for the benefit of the patients. This is not, hey, we're moving all of our staff to another country so we can nickel and dime people. It's everywhere within the United States is more expensive, and in-person team members who are dedicated and engaged deserve more money. And this is a strategic avenue to do that.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that makes sense. And I to expand it even further, our patients, I think, get better care when they get responded to quicker. When they've got somebody more quickly responding to a text they send in, or answering a phone call quickly, or want to know, a question about their insurance. When I get, so the new VA can I say hiring? We're bringing on, we're engaging with, I don't even know the right terminology, is going to do a lot of the administrative tasks. They're going to pre-pull the insurance. They're going to pre-populate our Vision Source Max system. So when the patient goes to check out, their benefits are already in the system. And so that's a smoother, easier transition for them. It's better for us to educate them on the process. Our VA in the exam room as a scribe isn't there just taking notes, but also when we say, hey, I'm educating you on myopia management, they're able to send to that patient the documentation and the educational materials along with it. And so it's a seamless process. Ultimately, I want either the current VA or another one to really be our first primary phone answering person or texting person, to schedule appointments quicker, to help patients, get questions answered. That way the experience that they have is top notch, because there's nothing worse than the experience I've had this week with my dentist last 2 weeks. We have a new dentist. They've never answered the phone when I called. Have not once yet. I get the silly little message. It still says that, it's the pre-Thanksgiving message that we're closed. Leave a message, we'll call you back, which I did, and they called me back, but not being able to engage with them when I want to engage with them. I've got a bill for my kids there. I need to give them $800, and they're not answering the darn phone for me to give them $800. I've got a whole list of things to do when I have my appointment next week, to sit down with the owner and say, hey, we got to fix this. Because you're a great doctor, but this experience is not what I'm looking forward to. So that's one of the things I want to, and one of the reasons why we're bringing in the next virtual assistant, is because of that experience. And that reflects poorly not just on me, but on my entire team. If it's if it's a good experience, it reflects positively on all of us.
And the reality is, in today's market, if people have a frustrating experience, they generally call the next Google listing. If you look at new patient phone calls, and I can't remember, but there's a 14% chance that a new patient will leave a voicemail if it goes unanswered. And within, I think, less than 10 minutes, if they have not been called back and they are a new patient, they're most likely to call the next available Google listing to make that appointment. So the value of being proactive and quick to act, not only for the benefit of the patients, but maximizing your conversion on all opportunities is essential.
Yep. Nope, I agree. I think experience is number one, right? And if the experience is good, the perceived value of everything we're offering is good. If the experience is bad, even if what we're offering is very high value quality, the perception of it isn't there. So cool. Well, Cory, Joe, I think that we've got lots more conversations on this topic of virtual assistants, and how we engage with them is super important. And apologize for any technical difficulties, but Monday number 2 is struck again. But I think the conversation is it was super helpful and enlightening. I've taken notes just for my own office. So, any last parting words, parting thoughts that you wanted to make sure that we share with everyone?
I mean, all I can see, if I could have converted my opinion on this, almost anyone could. I mean, once you get involved, you'll realize how valuable it is.
No, I mean, last comment for me is we're just really grateful to be in the industry. I've been lucky to, interact with lots of entrepreneurs and dentists and optometrists and dermatologists, and have really enjoyed the optometric profession as a whole, and the relationships and learning that we have undergone as a company. And so overall, just as we wrap up, we're so grateful to be here. And I'm excited to do this in a year or do this again in 2 years and talk about how we have taken the services we provide and the ease of integration to the next level so that we can be even bigger and better.
Love it. And Cory, if anybody's, I'll put your contact information and Meet's contact information in the notes. But for those who are listening, if they want to reach out, where can they find you?
Yeah, so best way to reach us is our website, which is www.hireteem.com. It's HIRETEEM.com. And from there, there's a bunch of different ways to reach out to our team and contact us to learn more.
So, awesome. Well, I appreciate it very much. And Joe, appreciate you being on, appreciate you sharing your expertise and PCS's expertise in an area that I didn't understand at all, and I'm sure my colleagues are many of them are in the same boat. So appreciate what you do, and we'll add PCS's contact information in the show notes as well. By the way, I don't know if you've heard, but on Chris Wolf's bonus episode last Friday, he spoke very highly of things to pay attention to on billing and coding, which I've shared with my whole team and actually our virtual assistant as well, to make sure that when she's scribing, she keeps an eye out for all of those so that we don't run afoul anywhere. So, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and look forward to the next conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Look forward to it.